Cheating uncovered through DNA test? I hate my life. My wife is a Mahara, and my daughter is her clone. My son was so outraged at my refusal to deal with it that he left home as soon as he turned 18. He knew what was going on and wanted no part of it. My daughter knew what her mother was like and decided she wanted to be just like her. I felt sorry for my daughter's poor husband. I realized I had made a mistake before my first wedding anniversary. Mildred seemed to think she was more attractive than she really was and was constantly flirting to bolster her image. The problem was that the flirting wasn't limited to flirting. Apparently, she didn't think there was anything wrong with sleeping with other men until I knew about it. The big problem was that I'd always known. 26 years I knew, and 26 years I didn't say anything. I think it's easy to see why my son left. The big question, of course, is why didn't I leave? I wish I had a good answer. I didn't like what my wife was doing, and I didn't approve of it. I was just too lazy or complacent to do anything about it. I cooked the meals, did the laundry, and cleaned the house. Mildred never refused me love and was often the initiator of it. She was grumpy and a real fool, but I learned to ignore it. I believed I had no choice. Unfortunately, I was just a regular guy. My hair was thinning a bit, I wore bifocal glasses, and I was about 10 pounds overweight. The extra weight was not because of muscle, but because of a flabby stomach. I also worked at the same job for 26 years. It was boring, and I was at a dead end career-wise. The younger guys were smarter than me and had more ambition. I was only working to support myself. I had no savings or retirement fund, and the only insurance was what the company offered. We didn't even buy a house. We rented it from my wife's brother. My future was as bleak as my past. Life sucked. Mildred was holding up a little better than I was. She did some sort of exercise regularly. She was also better at watching her weight than I was. She needed to keep herself in shape to be able to meet guys. I don't want it to look any worse than it really was. Mildred wasn't going out with guys for love all the time. She was secretly having affairs. It was only one guy at a time, and probably only one or two different ones a year. I don't know if they eventually dumped her or vice versa. I really didn't care. At least she had the decency to never bring them into the house. I was never interested in other women. I'd been approached a few times over the years, but I just shrugged it off. I was sure they would be disappointed if I responded to their flirting. It seemed like too much trouble for me. My daughter Julie was married to a guy who liked toast with milk. Who am I to throw stones? She probably chose him because he reminded her of me. Shortly after they were married, they had twins. Beautiful little girls. They were adorable, but I couldn't escape the thought that they would eventually become just like their mother and grandmother. What a shame. The only accomplishments in my life were my secretary, Joyce, and our company newsletter boy, Rodney. Joyce wasn't really my secretary because she took care of 6 employees in the office. I just felt like she took better care of me than the other 5 guys. Rodney was my ray of sunshine. I liked him because he had a good attitude. He never complained about anything and always had a smile on his face for me. I don't know if he was aiming for something in terms of a career, but he seemed to enjoy what he was doing. Joyce and Rodney were pretty close in the office and seemed to always share gossip and some daily joke. I looked forward to spending the day with them just as much as I looked forward to getting away from my wife. Joyce and I had worked together for 13 years, but I still didn't know much about her. The 2 most important things I knew were that she was lonely and that she hated my wife. I was never interested in the reasons behind either of those facts. Things got more interesting one day when my daughter Julie burst into the office and announced that she had just enrolled the twins in a scoliosis study. Apparently, both girls had slight curvatures of the spine. Because genetic scoliosis is inherited, several groups have received large government grants to study how it is passed from generation to generation. She explained in detail how it can affect the heart, as well as other medical problems, some of which are life-threatening. I could tell she was extremely concerned. Part of the research involved looking at the genetic characteristics of the subjects' families. Julie proudly handed me a small padded envelope that contained a plastic bottle and instructions on how to spit into the bottle and close the lid. I always thought they used cotton swabs and took samples from your cheek. The envelope was prepaid and had the address on it. All you had to do was follow the instructions. She thanked me for agreeing to help and left smiling. What did that devilish brat want? Joyce brought me a fresh cup of coffee to find a reason to be curious. She signed the kids up for some scoliosis test, and she wants my DNA. You shouldn't talk so harshly about my daughter. I thought you did those DNA tests 4 or 5 years ago. I did. It was part of the company's medical program. Those tests weren't good enough? They don't even know I did them. I just wanted to make sure the kids were mine before I made a new will. I can understand why this is a concern. A wide smile shone on Joyce's face. She seemed to take great pleasure in insulting Mildred at every opportunity. Okay. Don't keep me in suspense. Are you the children's father or not? Julie and Jason are both my kids. What else can I say? With this kind of luck, you should play the lottery. Jason's fine. He was just fed up with the whole situation and angry that his father couldn't fix it. You gotta stop humiliating Mildred all the time. I'm sorry, boss, I just can't help myself. Are you gonna pee in a bottle? It's spit, Joyce. They want me to spit in the bottle. As if on cue, Rodney, who delivered the Daily Mail and memos, entered the office. Joyce's eyes lit up. Rodney, kid, you're just in time. John needs you to spit in that bottle for him. I think Rodney was as surprised by Joyce's remark as I was. I understood the importance of this research, but suddenly what Joyce said seemed like a great idea. I handed Rodney the vial, and Joyce and I both watched as he carefully placed his DNA inside. The label on the bottle says, John Ritter. I'm okay with that, as long as you guys keep me out of trouble. Don't worry, Rodney. John and I will make sure you don't. Joyce put the bottle in an envelope and sealed it. I'll make sure this gets mailed out today, boss. She was grinning from ear to ear as she left my office. Rodney looked puzzled. You know she's got a thing for you, John. What? Joyce always says nice things about you, and I can see the way she looks at you when you don't notice it. She said a couple times she wishes you weren't married. I always thought of Joyce and I as friends, but I never assumed she was interested in a different kind of relationship. I was flattered by Rodney's words, and I realized I was smiling to myself. Joyce would be a much better conversationalist than Mildred. I decided I'd better pay more attention to what was going on. Thanks for your help, Rodney. I'll see you again this afternoon. For the next few weeks, things went on as usual. I tried to be a little more attentive to Joyce after hearing what Rodney had said. I found it odd that my secretary had a higher opinion of me than my wife. For the first time in my married life, I had reason to think about divorce. I had always been very happy with my marriage. The more attention I paid to Joyce, the kinder she was to me. I liked it that way. On Friday afternoons, I used to try to sneak out of work early. No particular reason, I just started doing it years ago and saw no reason to stop. No one ever seemed to complain. I got home, plopped into a soft chair, and heard my wife and daughter arguing in the kitchen. It was obvious they had no idea I was home. It wasn't easy, but I was able to pick up scraps of conversation. No, Julie, I have no idea who that could be. I was sure it was your father. My father? Damn it, Mom. He's not my father. I assumed that's when she got the DNA results and kept them. I have no idea who my father is, and worse, my own mother has no idea who he is. There was a lot of unintelligible mumbling as they both spoke at the same time, but I was still able to make some things out. They can't even name this DNA sample. It's not in any database. If you can't help me, who the hell can? I enjoyed listening to my daughter slap her mother on the forehead. Payback is hell. It would have been nice to listen to the whole conversation, but I had to settle for part of it. For the next few minutes, I couldn't make out what they were talking about. The last thing I heard was something about another test on Tuesday morning and the slamming of the door as Julie left. Sooner or later, I would have to tell them the truth. but right now I was savoring the moment. Well, this was really exciting and was the highlight of my week. Joyce would have been thrilled if I had told her what had happened on Monday. I was a little disappointed that I would have to wait until Monday to tell her. After dinner, Mildred announced that she had to visit one of her friends who had a personal problem. She didn't know how long she would be staying and asked me not to wait. I doubted she had any friends with personal problems, but I figured now would be a good time to visit Joyce. "John, what the hell are you doing here? You should have called first. I look like shit." "I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. I thought you might want to know how your little stunt with the DNA sample turned out." Joyce looked good. She was wearing sweatpants and a pullover shirt. It was the first time I'd seen her without makeup, and she looked pretty good. I wondered why I hadn't noticed how attractive she was before. I saw her every day at work, but never really paid attention to her. "Do you want coffee or a beer?" "I'll have a beer, but if I have more than 3, I can't drive home." "All right." "Uh-huh. I'll make sure there's at least 4, maybe 6 in the fridge." "6 beers? I'll fall asleep." "Don't worry. I got a big bed." Hell, if Joyce wasn't hitting on me. I didn't come here for that. I just wanted to gloat over the situation between my wife and daughter. Joyce wanted to get me into bed, even if I was drunk. I'm not much of a drinker, mostly because I don't do it very often. We started by discussing the DNA trick and laughed at the results. After that, the conversation turned to other topics. 3 hours later, I'd had as much beer as I could handle and was already drunk. Joyce convinced me that I couldn't make the car ride home. Eventually, we ended up in bed. We made love twice that night and once the next morning. When I got home, Mildred was still there. I kicked off my shoes and lay down on the couch. The next thing I knew, my wife was shaking me by the shoulder. "What are you doing here? Get up and take a shower, and if you're still hungover, go to bed. If you're going to go out drinking, at least learn to do it right." Mildred couldn't imagine me spending the night with another woman. She assumed I went to a bar, got drunk, and went home. I thought the whole thing was funny. I knew I would do it more often from then on. Since it was Saturday, we needed to mow the lawn and wash the cars. I worked all day and felt great. It was like a whole new world had opened up to me. I now realized that I no longer had to resign myself to a life of humiliation and nagging. It wasn't hard at all to imagine a life without Mildred. I had no trouble at all imagining a life with Joyce, and I decided that the next time I saw her, I would drink no more than 2 beers. I thought the weekend would never end. But finally Monday came. Joyce had a bright smile and looked better than ever. We decided we were going to act really cool around the rest of the staff. Everything was going well until Rodney showed up. I think he had a 6th sense about it, because he knew right away that something had changed between Joyce and me. He didn't say anything, but just looked at both of us with the widest smile we'd ever seen. We both smiled broadly back at him, and he realized it for sure. I think it made his day better. No one else in the office guessed anything. I realized from Mildred and Julia's conversation that something was going to happen on Tuesday morning. Joyce had asked Rodney to spit into one of the little cups from the drinking fountain. I carefully placed the nasty thing in the top left drawer of my desk. I pressed the edges of the cup to make a spout. Around 10 o'clock, Mildred showed up unexpectedly. At least she seemed to. Joyce politely ushered her into my office and left the door open. "John, there's been a problem with the DNA sample you gave Julie 2 weeks ago. She needs another one. I brought one of the bottles with me. Do you mind?" "Of course not. What was wrong with the last sample? It didn't seem that complicated to me." "I'm not sure, but somehow the sample was contaminated and couldn't be used. This will only take a second." Mildred handed me the bottle and sat down, waiting for me to spit. At that moment, Joyce poked her head through the door. "Mildred, if you have a parking ticket, I can validate it." While Mildred dug through her purse and handed Joyce the ticket, I quickly filled the bottle from the glass without looking. I brought the bottle to my mouth when my wife turned her head toward me again. I was as deft as a Vegas magician as I closed the bottle and handed it back to her. I had to admit there was no doubt about it. It looked like I had spit into the vial. "Here you go. said Joyce as she handed Mildred the confirmed coupon and returned to her desk. Mildred smiled, took the bottle and put it in the envelope. My desk drawer was a mess. My secretary and I spent the rest of the day giggling like schoolboys. Joyce didn't complain as she cleaned out my desk drawer. Over the next few weeks, Joyce and I met several times, but never for a night out. Mildred thought I was becoming a drunk and spending all my free time at the local bars. I saw no reason to let her think otherwise. Some nights when Joyce and I didn't make love, we just talked or watched a movie. When we did make love, it was great. I always had at least 2 beers before going home to Mildred's house. It was Wednesday morning when my son-in-law, Wilbur Connor, came into my office. "John, do you have to help me? I'm going crazy. Between Julie and your wife, our house had become a war zone." "Wait a minute, Will. What the hell are you talking about? What battle?" Wilbur was nervous. He was my son-in-law, but he and I never had a serious father-son relationship. He was always a little reserved. It wasn't easy for him to come to me with this conversation. I didn't want to do anything that would discourage him. They were constantly arguing about the DNA tests Julie needed to get tested for scoliosis. Thank God I'm at work most of the day. "Could you please elaborate?" I quietly turned on the intercom so Joyce could hear us. "I don't know for sure, but it seems that none of the DNA samples you turned in matched either Julie's or her twins. That really upset Julie. She always thought you were her biological father, and now she's not so sure. If I'm touching on a sensitive subject here, please let me know, Mr. Ritter, and I'll stop. I just assumed you were aware of some of the issues." "Don't worry about it, Will. I'm just curious about what's going on. I hate to admit it, but I've had some suspicions myself over the years." It was a lie, of course, but he didn't need to know that. Julie had Mildred take DNA samples from the other 3 men. None of those samples matched either. Of course, this made Julie furious. She accused her mother of being a cheater who had slept with so many men that she couldn't remember their names. The other day, Mildred was in tears. "I have to agree, that sounds pretty bad, Will. You don't know who the 3 men who took the test were, do you?" "Of course I do." Wilbur pulled a small piece of paper out of a folder and held it out to me. I glanced at it quickly and recognized 2 names. "The frustrating thing, Mr. Ritter, is that Julie never asked me to give her a sample to analyze. From the conversations I'd had, I figured it had something to do with spitting in a bottle. I never did. I have reviewed some of the paperwork and it has my DNA on it and states that I am the father of the twins, but I never gave a sample. Something's not right here." I couldn't help but laugh to myself at the irony of the situation. I had tried to deceive them by saying I was Julie's father, and Julie was hiding the fact that Wilbur wasn't the twins' father. My daughter was even worse than her mother. I felt sorry for Wilbur, but he was in the same situation as me. "Wilbur, are you happily married to my daughter?" "Honestly, sir, no. I think I made a big mistake, but I don't know what to do about it." "Look at me, Wilbur. I made the same mistake 26 years ago and did nothing about it. Do you want to end up like me?" Wilbur remained silent. He knew what the answer would be, but he didn't want to answer the question because he didn't want to hurt my feelings. "What do you want me to do for you, Wilbur?" "Nothing, I guess. I just needed someone to talk to. You've always seemed like a reasonable man to me. If you have any ideas, please let me know." I only thought about it for a few seconds. I leaned over my desk and looked my son-in-law in the eye. "Run, Wilbur, run!" I don't know if he was relieved or depressed. He stood up, smiled, and shook my hand. I got the feeling that I wouldn't see Wilbur Connor for a while. Good luck to him. "John Ritter, you are the biggest hypocrite in the world. How can you give that kind of advice to your son-in-law when you don't even intend to follow it yourself?" Joyce seemed a little upset. "You're right. You're absolutely right. I admit it. I wish I could talk to someone like me." "Well, talk to me. I'll give you the same advice you gave him. I've watched you for the last 13 years, and I never understood why you kept letting that harpy bully you. If there was ever a good time to do something about it, now is the time." John Ritter, you have a week to make a decision or I'm out of here. She's never slammed my office door before, but today she did. I got the impression she wasn't kidding. Ralph Geiger and Jerry Trammell were friends of our family. I realize now that they were better friends of my wife than I was. Those were two names on Wilbur's list that I recognized. I had no idea who Raymond Stanford was. Joyce calmed down and returned to the office with a fresh cup of coffee. She didn't apologize for her words, but at least she wasn't slapping my forehead anymore. I didn't need two women doing this. All right, John. Who are these guys on the list your brother-in-law gave you? I motioned a piece of paper across the table to her. Two of them are old family friends, and I don't know the third. What do you want to do? Would it make you mad if I told you I don't want to do anything? Yeah. I don't expect you to start a vendetta or anything, but I do expect you to get your dead ass up and do something. After 13 years, I finally got you to pay attention to me, and I'm not going to back down. If you don't come up with something, I will. Dinner that night was tense. I could tell that Mildred was troubled about something, but she didn't share it. We didn't talk much at dinner. In fact, it was better than the usual conversations we had. When I went down to the bar after apologizing, she kept the sarcastic remarks to herself. This time I actually went to the bar and got really drunk. The next morning at work, it was business as usual until Rodney came in. He put the mail on Joyce's desk and then came into my office and handed me a brochure. The look I rewarded him with suggested the answer. I handed one to Joyce, too. Since you guys both like to travel, I thought you might be interested. He smiled again as he left the office. Well, I in turn smiled as I looked at the brochure. It was a 4-week tractor-trailer driver's course that qualifies you for a commercial driver's license. Joyce walked in, giggling to herself, with the course information in hand. Where did Rodney get this nonsense from? It's not fair, John. I don't think it's bullshit. In fact, I think it looks interesting. You're out of your mind. I can't imagine either of us doing this, let alone both of us. I can imagine. In fact, I think I look pretty good in jeans. Yeah, but what does that have to do with the case? Well, I can't wear a skirt and drive a big car, can I? The conversation went on for almost an hour until she finally wore me down. Joyce and I took the afternoon off, and 2 hours later were enrolled in driver's school at the Lehigh Institute. We both had enough free time and sick leave to finish the course and keep our jobs if things didn't work out. The atmosphere at home that evening was not a pleasant one. Wilbur left Julie unbeknownst to me. I was proud of the boy. For some reason, Mildred thought I had something to do with his leaving. I never denied it or confirmed it. I went to a local bar and ended up at Joyce's. When I got home, Mildred was in bed. The next few days we were busy at work. Joyce had to urgently hire a temp for the next month, and I had to reschedule my work to make sure it got done. Joyce set up an appointment for me with a divorce attorney and personally drove me there. I don't know on what grounds the lawyer eventually obtained the divorce, but she wanted to know the names of the guys Wilbur had given me. I told Mildred that I would be working out of the office for the next few weeks. She didn't care one way or the other. Because we lived close to the school, the daily commute was easy. One night there was a big thunderstorm, and Joyce and I had to settle into our first motel room rather than drive home. The 4 weeks went by too fast. I was a better driver than Joyce, but couldn't keep up with her when it came to backing up and parking. We both ended up with degrees and some nice job offers. That night, we took Rodney out to dinner at the Outback. The more time I spent with Joyce, the more I wanted to be with her. I had no idea that companionship could be so enjoyable. I berated myself for not doing it sooner. That night at dinner, I asked Mildred how the scoliosis research was going. Admittedly, I teased her a little when I did so. The reaction was not quite what I expected. Instead of getting angry and lashing out at me, she quietly got up and left the room. An hour later, she told me that she needed to visit a sick friend. As she was walking out the door, I decided to visit my friend as well. I can't say the transition went smoothly, but a week later, Joyce and I were working for one of the largest trucking companies in Carlisle, PA. Yes, I slipped away like a thief in the night. I never argued with my wife about anything. I quietly packed my things and disappeared. The divorce papers were delivered the next day. I moved all my stuff into Joyce's house, and Rodney was more than willing to watch the house and forward mail in exchange for free rent. I spend all day with Joyce, and so far we haven't gotten on each other's nerves. I'm sure we'll have disagreements eventually, but so far so good. We don't plan on having kids, but if we do, I hope they don't have scoliosis. Wilbur disappeared and we never saw him again. Circumstances forced Julie to move in with her mother. The last I heard, things were not going well. A few months later, Joyce and I stopped by to visit Jason in Colorado. We got along better than we ever had. I think he was glad I had finally taken some action. He and Joyce had no problem finding common ground. To make things right, Jason promised to tell Mildred and Julie the truth about the DNA tests when he got home for Christmas. The end!